first,
Yeah.
and just understanding your journey. I understand you're currently a pharmacist, right? But I would also like to know the kind of things that you've done, the kind of jobs that you have before becoming a pharmacist.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I want to thank you so much for allowing me onto your platform. As I typically say to people, my name is Dr. Oye Owolewa. I'm a pharmacist. I'm a former commissioner in my home ward of Ward 8 and the current U.S. Representative of Washington, D.C., as well as a candidate for council at large. But that's kind of what I'm doing. That's not who I am. Who I am, I'm a child of, as you said, Nigerian immigrant parents that came here in the 1970s right after the 1964 Civil Rights Act, not far after the Brown versus Board of Education and beyond, and they were able to come to America, and that's where they met. They stayed in the United States, decided to raise a family here because they knew if they worked hard, they could live with dignity. If their kids worked hard, the kids can live with dignity. So they had a five child family, and I was fourth out of five. And soon after, my parents pushed me to become a scientist, introduced that to me at a very young age, and I ended up becoming a pharmacist. After a few years in pharmacy school, I realized I was the only black male in a 150 person class. And originally I thought it was just racism and inequality, but what I realized the biggest difference between those who got into the pharmacy school and not was early career exposure, right? People who want to be engineers, people who wanted to be doctors, people who want to be pharmacists seem to align into that track versus looking into it in the near future. So I graduated my PharmD degree, my doctor of pharmacy, moved to Washington, D.C., and I started volunteering in classrooms, getting kids interested in science careers. So I was still a pharmacist until one day, one of my patients said, go to a community meeting and get more involved. Went to the community meeting, didn't really like how it was run, and I made my unhappiness shown. And somebody said, hey, this is so much better. Why don't you run? So I took all fear pushed to the side, ran for office, won by one single vote, and here I am now. So I've been a pharmacist working from um, Rite Aid to Walgreens, from Safeway now to Giant, and now taking time off to run for at-large council. So those are the jobs. More importantly, those are the experiences that got me into the type of public service I'm in now.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for a
So,
detailed response. That's pretty good. Thank you. So my next question would be, how has being a Nigerian American influenced how you show up, build relationships, and also your chosen career path, eventually going into politics?
yeah, well, it's really the values of being a Nigerian American. You know, my mom and dad were um, they were from two different parts of Nigeria. My mom was from Oyo State, my dad was from Kwara State, and they didn't meet each other in Nigeria. They met each other in America. But some of those shared values of hard work, selflessness, giving back to the community were things that I learned firsthand, and it wasn't taught to me. It was shown throughout life, not just my parents, but the people they interacted with. You know, my mom, she was a civil engineer by day, but she seemed to know everything about education. So she got me into schools, got my friends into opportunities, and really helped us all get into college with as much money as possible. And my dad was the president of the Nigerian, the Yoruba community of Massachusetts in a long time. So I grew up with leadership around me to the point where I was soaking it in without even realizing it as such. So coming to DC, feeling the Nigerian American community, but also using some of the things I've learned from, I would say, our community and bringing it over to the general community of DC has been really impactful, especially at a time where folks from the black communities are in fractures, whether it's black Americans from way back, or generationally Americans, or immigrants, you know, really trying to find myself as a bridge of someone who was born in the United States, but had those traditional values learned from back home, has been providing me an opportunity to work extra hard, you know, not make excuses, but also help other people find what their solutions look like, getting young kids into science careers at an early age so they can grow up with that same type of energy and same type of expectations is my way of, you know, bringing that uh, values from where we grew up with to the next generation of Americans and young people in DC.
Wow, excellent, excellent. Thank you for sharing that. We're going to get
So,
into the DC politics and things like that eventually.
for sure.
Please, if you're here, please let us know that you're here. Put your name in the comment section, where you're joining us from, and if you have any question for our guest, United States Representative Owolewa, please put it in the chat. So now, your journey began November 2020 when you were
Sure.
elected to a 2-year term as the shadow U.S. representative.
Mhm.
What was the experience of winning that election in 2020? How did it feel?
Yeah, interestingly enough, that was a surreal experience. I was the current ANC commissioner, which is a very grassroots elected position in Southeast DC for a couple of years. And when I was elected to that position, I believe I was the first Nigerian American male elected in DC. And then I was running for the shadow representative race, which is typically called the U.S. representative, but because DC is not a state, we're not the same position as a Steny Hoyer or a Jasmine Crockett or a Nancy Pelosi. We typically just fight for DC statehood and lobby for such. But as I got closer and closer to the election day, I realized it was just bigger than that restricted role. Whether it's Nigerian Americans across the country, or whether it's young people, whether it's people in DC that just never seen a name like this win a race, it really brought an opportunity to get those who otherwise would be too afraid or may be hesitant to get into running for office to do so. But at the same time, when I was getting closer to winning, a lot of Nigerian Americans across the country got really interested and involved. And they started asking me questions like, can you help me with my visa? Can you help me with this issue? My congressperson isn't listening to me. And rather than saying that's not my job, I leaned into it. So I started doing more than what was asked for me, and it really created a real value in the role that doesn't always feel the value. And that position that to not only do more for the Nigerian American community nationwide, but also do more things in DC, whether it's creating budget clinics to help returning citizens get their lives back, get their records sealed, whether it's business workshops to help local entrepreneurs learn how to get grants, contracts, certifications. Whether it's doing an immigration town hall last year when the non-citizen community was really concerned about what a second Trump administration would mean to them. The things I was doing and the pressure I was put on me by Nigerian Americans allowed me to step it up for folks not only in that community, but folks locally here as well. So, it was a really surreal experience. I went from having maybe 100 followers on social media to having thousands, and it really showed what happens when a community, embraces our own, and I'm really grateful for that.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. Well,
Yeah,
a little bit more about having more followers, just like you said now. So one thing about this position is it's very different for what it's used to be. It's popular. So a lot of politicians are motivated by money, and in this particular position, you don't have a voting power, or you're not
sure.
paid for the position, and things like that. So my question is, what keeps you motivated and keep pushing forward? That's why that there's no the usual in quote motivation that we experience.
Yeah, for sure. I think the motivation that I had was the same thing we grew up with, getting something done, moving on to the next task. And I felt empowered because I was working with people that so-called politicians stay away from. Folks who don't vote, folks who aren't necessarily engaged, but folks who still need stuff. So I was helping returning citizens where council members and the mayor looked the other way. I was going to create an immigration town hall and bring real lawyers at a time where our budget didn't increase legal funds. And all of these things matters because people were calling me at their last resort. People were calling me when they were worried about what's happened to them next, and seeing the opportunity to step up and change somebody's life for the better, it kept me going. I'm still a pharmacist, and being able to use my mind and the way I think to see a problem, find a solution, see a problem, find somebody who can help, see someone who needs something and get something to them right away was just something that I just kept doing. And it got to the point where my reputation became that. And
Hmm.
even if somebody isn't politically engaged, usually somebody around them is watching what's happening, and it really carries forward. So, I didn't really do it for the idea of running for a higher office. I did it
Mhm.
because I was raised to see something and do something.
Wow, seeing something and doing something. All right.
Right.
Yeah, that's very nice. So you mentioned something just now. People who don't vote, people who not
Sure.
politically inclined.
Hmm.
I mean, that means that you're not surprised that there are people who still believe in conspiracy theories that, well, the vote has been
Sure.
counted and why should I go and line up to vote somewhere and things like that. So,
Sure.
one, what would you say to the such individuals? And yeah, the second part of that question is there seems to be a connection between the fundraising, poll results, and eventually the outcome of the election. And I believe that there's certain things that the public don't understand about this, and politicians understand it more. That's why I see politicians push for these three things and try to see if they can use that to win election. So, is there anything that you feel that pub, we, the public, don't understand about one, the fundraising part of politics?
Sure.
Second, the polling result, and eventually the outcome of the election.
Yeah, I'll answer both your questions at the same time. There are plenty of reasons why folks don't want to be involved politically. Some people feel like it doesn't matter what happens because someone says the right thing and they get into office, they do nothing. Some folks feel like things are rigged and somehow their votes won't be counted or whatnot, whether it's in Southeast DC or even in Nigeria. We hear it. Um, we hear it. And oftentimes, not only affects people's interest in voting, it also affects people's interest in running for office. And the reason why we have a lot of people who shouldn't be in office or people running for a 30th term is because there are a lot of people that would be able to do a great job, but they don't have the motivation. They don't believe that they're good enough. They don't believe that they're connected. They don't believe that they're wealthy enough. I'm not going to lie. When that first person told me, hey, if you're so much better, why don't you run? There was a moment where I was like, well, how am I going to run? I'm not from here. My name is different. I don't think I'd be a viable candidate. But I said, you know what? Why not? If I'm thinking these people are terrible and I might be able to do a better job, why not me? And why not us? And so when I ran and won, I didn't just, bask in the glory of winning a race by one vote. I started motivating other people to also take that jump. And from today, I've helped about 13 people win their elections, and I haven't charged them a dime because I know it's important to get people into office. The better people are in office, the more folks that can be motivated to jump into this. Now, the second part of your question about raising money and polling information and people winning the seat, there's a correlation to it. The more people that donate from your district, the more likely you'll get their vote. Most people don't want to donate to someone who's they're not going to vote for. And I also understand that there's two types of candidates. One that wants to run because they want to be somebody. They just want to be the mayor. They just want to be the governor. They just want to be the representative. But there's also a candidate that's running because they want to do something. And
Hmm.
if you're the candidate that actually wants to run to do something, then it's much easier to fundraise, to build support, because it's not about me. It's not about the candidate. It's about the change you want to make and being the vehicle to change that direction. I graduated college without student debt because I got a scholarship. I understand the difference that I made in my life. I was able to buy a house. I was able to get into run for office because I didn't have student debt. I'm now pushing for our local university, UDC, to be tuition free because I want more
Hmm.
young people to have that same investment to do the things that I've been able to do. That sounds a lot different than saying, hey, my father was a former council member. I should be a council member too.
Yeah,
And when you have those, no, but that's real. So when you have that true vision and you want to invest in people and bring it back, it makes it a lot easier for you to go to people and say, hey, can you chip in $15? Can you chip in $100? It just helps us go because we have a righteous mission in mind to develop the district in a way that's more grassroots.
yeah.
That's how you build a coalition We've raised the most. We have the most cash on hand. The polling numbers favor us, but not because my name is easy, because it's not easy. I mean, to you
Yeah,
it's easy, brother, but not to other people. But the work
yeah.
has been laid out, the vision's been laid out, and we're trying to really improve the quality of life in the district, and people can see that. So polling numbers are great. Fundraising is amazing, but when you tailor your message to something that has real purpose, and you're trying to be different than some of the other candidates who just want to run on their name recognition or run because they think they're cool, it really shows the difference in the quality of a campaign you're running.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So one thing you
Absolutely.
mentioned just now is people who want to come back to office the 30th time.
Yeah,
And I think I watched some of your interviews whereby, and also a statement that you make
yeah,
comparing being able to lead as an opportunity, and also people who have seen politics as opportunity to have a career.
right.
And one, we've seen people who think they should be born into politics and die while being in politics and things like that.
Sure.
So when you engage people who have this mindset, what do you think made them have that kind of mindset to be in office forever and just be there forever while other people cannot come in to be in that office? What's the mindset they have?
Yeah, I think being in power could be quite addictive, right? You have council members, congressional members, senators. They walk around with a big old entourage. Everyone wants their signature. Everyone wants to take a picture of them. They wake up feeling that importance, and I get it. But with me, I feel like I was somebody before politics, and I'm hoping to have a life after politics. I don't want to be the person running for a 15 term. And the way you can tell when somebody's been in office for too long is when they go from running on their ideas to
Mhm.
running on their experience, right? Because the world is changing every 4 or 5 years. And if you've been elected in 1990 and you're talking about your experience can help you in 2027, then you probably know a little bit less than the new person who never was a fresh perspective, who wants to get in and make that change and get out. And in Congress in itself, it institutionally prioritizes people who've been there the longest. So you only become the chair of a committee if you've been there for the longest of times, or if you raise the most money or beyond. So if somebody's been waiting 20 years for that chair spot, then they're not going to want to give it up in the 22nd year when they feel like it's their time to become the chair. So if they can
Mm.
kind of reform that to be the most, prepared person, or someone who could, if it's not based off of seniority and maybe some other type of merit, then maybe you won't have someone running for their 18th year hoping to get there. So, but to be honest though, the reason why I think it's important to make sure that we have a consistent turnover of leadership is because we need fresh ideas.
Mm.
Imagine if Donald Trump could run for fourth, fifth, sixth term. Imagine if George W. Bush was president for 4, 5, 6 terms. The country will be run differently. However, we have a Congress that seems to be there forever. We have a Supreme Court that's elected for life, and I don't believe it's good for the movement of our society. Last but not least, we also have to look at where a lot of these elected officials come from, right? They're usually lobbyists, children of other politicians. They don't always have that pedigree that will allow them to leave office, right? I'm a pharmacist.
Yeah,
If I'm done with my career, I can go back to a pharmacy. Some of
yeah.
these people are community organizers. Some of these people come from other professions, which is not a bad thing, but they don't see the light at the tunnel. They don't see maybe that they could pivot away from office after their term is over. They see themselves as, I gotta keep this paycheck. I gotta keep this rolling. I gotta make sure I'm on TV enough just so I can keep at this. They don't have that next thing to move to that could divide their legacy. And I think that also impacts how long these people stay in office as well.
Wow, I've never seen it that way. Thank you for explaining it that way.
Absolutely.
Because I just thought it's just power intoxication. I just thought that maybe service should be made a requirement to be a leader and things like that. Now, and
Mhm.
now I'm thinking maybe also making sure people actually have a career that they can go back to. That will
Yeah,
also that will also give them opportunity to know that, well, this is not a do or die. I can get it. If I don't get it, I have something I can do with my life, and I have other ways I can make impact and things like that.
for
Thank you for
sure.
sharing that. Well, you also mentioned something that I also want to ask you about:
Yeah,
having life before politics, during politics, and after politics. And that
for sure.
made me want to think about how politics have changed the way you see life, or your mindset about interaction. How has politics shaped your view of the world now that you're 5 years in?
Yeah, one thing I've learned, especially in DC last year, Trump was reelected, and because DC's not a state in our relationship with the federal government, we're a lot more prone to attacks, right? We had a Black Lives Matter plaza ripped up. We had our budget slashed and frozen by Congress. We've had laws overturned, and more recently, we had a National Guard and ICE deployment in DC, and we're still occupied 6, 7 months later. We also had council in America. They didn't do much. They may have had their own reasons to protect our home rule, but people in DC were marching. We didn't see too much support from our elected leadership. Power, money, status, fame, it doesn't change you. It exposes who you are,
Hmm.
right? So we have leaders in our community that were not elected, right? We have community organizers, we have teachers, we have all these things. But you also have elected people who are not leaders either. When the going got rough, they tucked and ran. They
Hmm.
tweeted when my neighbors, when many of them Latinos, some of them Africans, who may have been citizens or not citizens, were getting grabbed by ICE. So what I learned, especially last year, beyond the last 6, is that we can't just rely on those that we vote for to have our backs at all times. And
Hmm.
leadership is shown not when it's comfortable, when things are going well, but even more important, when things are not going well. And then nobody's out to support folks. Where is our leadership then? And that was part of what convinced me to run for council. People came
Hmm.
to me consistently as a last resort, and then after I work with them, I send them to someone who I would think will help them, who was elected, and I follow up with them 3 months later, and nothing happened. And at a time where DC is facing the highest unemployment because of Doge cuts, at a time where some of our local business partners are working with us and ICE, at a time where our budget is slashing healthcare but creating $1 billion subsidies for stadiums, we need someone who can come in and say, we're not going to play by the status quo anymore. And at a time where we have a lot of legislation that's not passed off of data, but is more just off of feelings, we need someone with a health and science background that can see what works and apply that to DC and beyond. Because we are the nation's capital and we are the richest country in the world, but there's too many income and economic disparities between communities. And my time in politics shows that we are ready for this, but we're also trying to get other good people involved as well. Because my goal is to be in office for a few terms, maybe, and get the next generation up. I don't want to run when I'm 80 years old talking about I have great experience and try to be that one that holds the door closed for the next generation. I want to bring the right generation into office and then see to that my job is done and just support people from the back.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I think
For sure.
it's a good place to get into conversation as to the fact that you've been a United States representative for 5 years and you made a decision that it's time to not rerun for that
Yeah.
position, and you pivot into another role. My question is, why making that decision now to not rerun, and why the council at large role, and what should we expect from you that is probably different from what people have experienced in the past?
For sure. There's two reasons why I decided to retire from this shadow house seat. Number one, to pass the baton. For the past 5 years, I got more people interested in this role, whether it's fighting for DC statehood, whether it's being in the forefront of national politics, as well as being local as well. And we really wanted to walk our talk. We're talking about retiring, giving other people chances. We had to do that ourselves. We can't just say that for other people and then just still continue doing what others are doing. Number two, we need to have that local impact. A lot of people don't realize that their governors, their city council members, their county executives has a higher and greater impact on their day-to-day life than the president of the United States does.
Hmm.
And to be able to make sure that our snow is picked up on time, our trash is handled, that we don't have huge rodent issues, make sure our healthcare is fortified, making sure our local university is tuition free, bringing investing in industries to rehire some of the USAID workers and the State Department workers who were unfairly and illegally fired, that comes from the local level. And as I mentioned before, I'm not running to be the big man and have the big title. I'm running
Yeah.
to do a couple of things. And those things I wanted to do correlates with the at-large council position. And that's what really guided me more than ego or the big name is really some of the things I wanted to get done.
Wow, getting things done. That's very
Absolutely.
important. So now let's talk a little bit about. Before I say that, thank you for joining us, Chris. Christy from Florida is showing you. Thank you for joining us. Please, if you're here, please let
Yeah.
us know where you're joining us from. And if you have question for our guest, please share your question. That would be nice. Thank you for joining us. So you mentioned getting things done,
Yeah.
and you feel that the situation with DC is quite different from the situation from other states. That's one thing that I observe when I move from one state to another state. That's homelessness,
Mm.
at housing and things like that. So, if you want to touch on that a little bit, I have seen that a couple of places have some situation with homelessness. I've been to San Francisco, Philadelphia, a lot of Chicago. People tend to be on the street and things like that. So, looking on the side of the Washington D.C., how is the situation unique, quite different from other places?
Yeah, we have a huge homelessness and housing insecurity situation here. We recently ripped away people's rental rights, so it makes it easier for them to be evicted locally, as well as we're seeing just the pressures of the federal government impact us. As I mentioned before, DC is not a state. So the federal government has a lot more influence on our laws than, say, our friends in Maryland and our neighbors in Virginia. So
Hmm.
when Donald Trump first instituted the National Guard deployment occupation, he also targeted the homeless encampments. So people living in tents. He was removing those people. And, we use the term homeless loosely. These people do have homes. They're just unhoused. So their tent is their home. So when the National Guard and beyond were shucking people's tents away and throwing away all the belongings, people were losing family pictures. People were losing their relatives' ashes. People were losing their identifications, and it made it that much harder for them to get their lives back on track. If you look at the data, it takes far less money to keep someone in their home than it does to get them in a home once they're on the street. So we need to invest more funding in rapid rehousing. We need to support folks who are on the brink of losing their homes. We need to make sure young people, like parents who are facing housing insecurity, are also taken care of because if their kids now end up on the street. Now you're affecting their educational experiences. It'll be harder for them to concentrate if they're hungry. They won't be able to read on grading level. And if you look at the future of people who aren't reading at grading level, it's usually not positive. When I was doing my exposure clinics with a lot of these returning citizens, folks who face incarceration, many of them who had criminal records or criminal histories dating back to their teenage years were struggling to read at a grade level. A lot of that could be traced to food equity. A lot of that could be traced to housing security. So if we pay for these things on the front end, then we don't have to waste so much money on incarcerating people. We don't have to waste so much money on getting people back on track if we get people on track in the beginning. So houselessness is a huge issue in DC. And my goal is to reinvest in not only in the programs, but also the folks who make a difference. Now, if this was a healthcare conversation, I can be on this
Yeah.
call for 3 hours without taking a breath. But also, when it comes to housing, I got to lean on the people who've been making a difference for decades. But right now, they're being disinvested from.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Well, so it seems that you're a little bit more passionate about healthcare. I think we can touch on that a little bit. So one of the things that surprises me is the fact that people are opposed to free healthcare. And based on you being on the street and talking to people, what is the most common arguments that people have against free healthcare?
Well, in terms of healthcare, it's not necessarily more passionate about it. It's just my career. I know it's at the
Yeah.
back of my hand. I've been a pharmacist for 12 years. I was in school for 6 years for it. I basically had 20 years of experience, including my high school years as a pharmacy technician in this pharmacy field. And being a pharmacist isn't just pushing tablets five at a time, it's about knowing the complexities of our insurance system. Now, the majority of people who are concerned about the idea of a free healthcare system or a public universal healthcare or Medicare for all, they're concerned about the cost, which I completely understand. It's going to be very expensive to have a universal healthcare system. However, our current healthcare system is even more expensive than the
Mm,
universal healthcare plan, whether it's the people who have unbillable care or folks who are underinsured and have to pay more. It actually costs far more to cover what we're doing right now than universal healthcare system. Look at Canada. Their insurance is, even though they cover everybody, is actually far less than America's. So just getting the information out there is important. I believe that when it comes to healthcare, it's not like tennis shoes or something. You know, you
mm,
pay for something not realizing you need it, but when you need it, you're glad you have it, so to speak. It's almost like a seatbelt, so to speak. So I think just having the conversation out there is important. But we also
mm.
need to have healthcare providers that serve in office. Right now, healthcare legislation is passed by lawyers, lobbyists, children of politicians, and they don't know the hell they talking about. Imagine they just don't, and they pass laws that they think make sense, but healthcare providers look at it like this is just nonsense. And we're losing pharmacies. Hospitals are going under strain. People are losing their health insurance in 2027 because it's a big, unbeautiful bill. And we need more healthcare providers in office to support people on a local level. So yes, health healthcare is complex. I'm 20 years in, I'm still figuring it out. But at the same time, we need to have folks in office who can make these right decisions and get this right.
Good, good, good. Thank you. It
For
seems you
sure.
like the word, the big, beautiful bill.
Oh, it's the big unbeautiful bill. It's insane. It's insane. But people in,
All right.
like, laws don't make us safe. People make us safe, and we need to make sure that we have the right people in office.
Hmm. Laws don't make us safe. People make us safe. So right, having the right people. Okay, that's.
It
Thank you
makes a
for
huge
throwing that
difference.
nugget in unexpectedly. Thank you, thank you. All right, so now let's move to some incident that you experienced that I saw still on housing.
Right.
So you experienced the FU word sprayed on your door.
Yeah.
And when I was watching the videos and researching about this session, I still there was no any explanation as to why that happened. Um, any incident that led to that, and any updates that you received after investigation.
So I don't know what led to it, but that was right when I launched my campaign. So I launched my campaign around September. This happened in October. Now, we unfortunately didn't have any camera systems up, and somebody spray painted the front of my house. They wrote FU on the porch and they spray painted the door. Since then, I haven't heard much from the police about the incident. I believe they closed it, but we've increased our security. We've put more security cameras and we walk a little bit differently than we used to. It's unfortunate, but it is where it is. And I'm glad that nobody was harmed. I'm glad that there hasn't been any repeated offense. But more importantly, I have to make sure that I'm protected myself and those around me.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Wow. The good thing is that that might be job for somebody who's trying to become a security for representative. So that's a job
We
opportunity
hiring.
right there. Thank you. Let's look at the good side of things.
Sure.
If you're here today, please let us know that you're here. Share your name, where you're joining us from. If you have a question for our United States representative, Oye Owolewa, please let us know. Another one still related to the happenings that you've experienced during politics is this that I saw. The House of DC Shadow Representative Oye Owolewa was struck by gunfire in Southeast. How was that experience, and any lessons learned from that that can prevent that in the future?
Yeah, yeah. I think you phrased it right, but I want everyone to know it was my house that got shot, not me that got shot. So a
Mhm.
few years ago, I came home and my house was shot into, and this is Southeast DC. So I guess the cops weren't there anymore. The people in the community, they seen that this is normal, so there wasn't that big gathering outside, and obviously I wasn't a target. I wasn't home at the point. But either way, cops came and left, but the streets were still talking. So I asked some of the young people around the block, like, what happened? Why was there a shooting? And from what they told me, it was basically they were outside playing music all day long. Normally they were playing music day in, day out, playing music day in, day out, almost creating like street block parties. And one day somebody had enough and shot at them. Now, thankfully, nobody was harmed. But I started asking these people, like, what keep you guys outside all day, all
Yeah.
night? Not blaming them, but like, why are you guys doing this? And basically, some of these brothers and sisters, they couldn't get the job they wanted to get. They couldn't work where they wanted to work, or they couldn't live where they wanted to live. So they're just out there just hanging. And I asked them, what keeps you, why? And they said their criminal records. You know, the things that they've done in the past prevents them from doing things that they want to do in the future. And I
Mm.
asked them, if I were to remove your criminal record, what would you do? They will live where they want to live. They'll work. They'll get that job they want. They won't be outside nor playing music. So I said, let me find your program that can get rid of your criminal record. And I just couldn't find a program that they would go to. So rather than complaining about what's not available, we created something called the Exposure Clinic. Now we worked with a community organization, we got a free lawyer, and we said, hey, maybe if 10, 15 people will show up, this will be positive. Somehow the news found out. And the
Yeah.
news put it on, they put us on the news, they interviewed me, and we went from having 25 sign-ups to having 200 sign-ups. We're like, okay,
Wow.
we need to change location. So we begged the church, please let us in. And they're like, all right, cool, you can use our space. And long story short, about 100 people showed up. And I thought it was great. I thought it was going to be a one-off event. I thought I did my job. And then the next morning, a bunch of guys called me up. You didn't remind me. You blah 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 blah. What's the next one? So I'm like, oh yeah, yeah. So we started doing it again and again and again. And it was every 3 months we had an expungement clinic. And long story short, we not only helped people get their lives together, but we also taught them to advocate for themselves. So if they saw a law that they didn't like, or if they thought that the process wasn't strong enough, I told them to go to their council members. I told them to go to the mayor. I told them that this is your job now. And they did just that. And now today, the laws, 3 years later, these laws are now a lot more beneficial to these folks because they got involved. And I'm really proud of this moment because I could have just said, woe was me, my house got shot, but I turned it into an opportunity for folks to empower themselves. So now they can not be in a gunfight because someone's mad at them for being outside. Now they can get the jobs that they want, and not only them, but the people that come behind them that are now being released from prison or now getting their lives on track. Now the laws are even more beneficial to them based off of those people that we met 3 years ago that decided to change their lives for the better. So I'm really proud of that. Not because of anything that I did, but really about how I motivated folks to do things on their own end.
Good, good. Well, thank you for sharing that because it seems like things have gotten better in terms of People who've experienced that and went to jail and they come back, they can get a job now. I think the government and private learns that, well, it's actually better to just let these people that want to walk to walk. Right? It's better to not make them be on the street, because then there's high temptation of doing something they're not supposed to do if they stay
Exactly.
on the streets. That makes a lot
Exactly.
of sense. But then there's something that I still don't understand in America that I've experienced is the aspect of the gun control.
Sure.
And when you talk to people, when you engage people, uh, I want to understand the the popular arguments that people have against gun control in terms of, well, people who shouldn't have firearm, why should they have it, and what are the things, what are the fears that people have against gun control?
Well, I'll be quite frank. When people like me and you have guns, then they want to institute gun control. But when people that don't look like us in certain areas, then they believe in their First or Second Amendment rights. So there is a lot. A lot of these conversations are rooted in areas that aren't always discussed as freely. Number two, it also talks about the role of money in politics. The NRA, the National Rifle Association, puts millions, if not billions of dollars behind campaigns and politicians. And this is not free money. There's
Hmm.
a there's no such thing as a free lunch in politics. So when they put money behind these candidates and they win, or they put money behind certain Congress members, they know that they'll make sure that there'll be no semblance of gun control. And when there's a tragedy, they'll just do marginal work and not necessarily do things that will make our community safe. There's an argument out there that guns don't kill people.
Hmm.
People do, and
Yeah.
I guess that's the truth. But if somebody has a knife and somebody has an AR-15, there's a lot more damage that person can do with the AR-15 than they can with a knife. And not addressing that is not being realistic. But with that said, like I said, there's Congress members, there's governors that won't move an inch towards gun control, regardless of how many kids are shot, regardless of how many school shootings, regardless of how many domestic violent situations turns violent, because of money in politics. So in my race, we turned on all corporate PAC money. We made sure that our voice is unbought, that we know who we can fight for, we know who we can fight, and we don't need permission from a corporate industry that doesn't have our best interests in mind. But to be honest, we have a gun problem in this country. We have a gun crisis in this country. And there's not enough communities that make these guns internally that we can say that it's an American driven problem. We are getting guns from other countries into these communities, from certain areas into mostly black neighborhoods, and it's not for our betterment. So I do believe we need to address con- our gun crisis, because it's taking too
Hmm.
many kids away, whether through death or through prison. This shouldn't be happening in 2026.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
I mean, there has to be a way to make that better and make a safer environment for everybody. One of the things that I also want to touch is the news again. The DC shadow congressman Owolewa has been hospitalized after what's been called a major car crash.
Sure.
What was that experience about, and what would you suggest to make the road safer and prevent such experience?
Yeah, I was driving in my little car. I was going just straight ahead, and long story short, a Virginia tagged Chevy Yukon, which is like the one of the biggest cars there is,
Yeah.
it cut in front of me and caused a hit and run car wreck. So the car drove off, but I was still there. I was concussed. I got out of the car, but I was taken to a nearby hospital, and I got to experience Southeast DC healthcare, and it was something that I wouldn't recommend to other people. That hospital has since been closed down, and it's just that. Now we need to make our roads safer, but right now DC, the way they make their roads safer is by getting tickets. That's more reactive, not proactive. Because if I lost my life that day, I don't care what happens to that driver, whether they go to jail, whether they face a hefty fine. I need to prevent my death versus penalize someone for killing me.
Mhm.
And I think we need more speed bumps. I think we need more rumble stickers. We need to do other things just to prevent bad things like this from happening. And I went through physical therapy. I had to stop short because of work, things like that. So it really shows the difference in certain communities. In my neighborhood, we live 22 years less than our friends in Georgetown, and we're about 8 miles apart. That's 22-year difference. A lot of that's because of policy violence. A lot of that is because of our healthcare disparities. But a lot of that is because of our traffic violence and lack of safety in Southeast DC. Cars are driving too fast. They collide too often, and it kills people and it harms communities.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. If you're here today, please let us know you're here. If you have questions for our guest, United States Representative Owolewa, please put your questions in the chat.
Mm,
There's so many things that we can still talk about. One
absolutely.
of the things that is the fact that you are doing something in Nigerian American and also still trying to reach out to the community and see how you can get these things better.
Mhm.
But if you can look back as to your experience, what would you say is the biggest push that you've made in terms of getting things done? What would you say in 5 years? Oh, I was glad we actually did that, and that you can always talk about anywhere you go. What would you say that is?
Ooh, there is too many to mention, but I'll say this: getting more people to run for office, or getting more people to become business owners, getting more young people to become pharmacists and scientists. I lump them all as my greatest accomplishments. Because if you can get someone to dream bigger, take that risk and take that jump and succeed, you change their family structure forever. When we're talking about working class DC residents who have been generationally in this city, but now there's a child that's going to become a pharmacist or a doctor. Now their parents are taken care of. Now their grandparents are taken care of. When one good person goes from, I don't know if I could ever run from office, to now being an elected official who is thriving, that changes
Mm,
their entire community because now they're seeing things that maybe I wouldn't see. When
yeah.
you get a business owner to go from an expensive hobby to now doing business with the government, getting funding to do such, that changes who they can
Mm,
reach and how they can do business with folks. I helped the child legacy theater. They were about to lose $50,000. We helped them get that money
mm,
back. Now they're interacting with more kids, keep them off the streets, getting them pipelined into careers, building their confidence, building their speaking abilities. These things matter. And when one person can do one thing for one person, see how they can do it, and see where they can go, see how they can inspire the next person, that's how we rebuild our communities from the grassroots up. So I'm really my biggest achievement is seeing other people achieve their dreams. That's what I want my legacy to be.
wow, that's a beautiful thing to say. Helping people to achieve the things that they want to achieve. That's really good.
Sure.
But let's get a little bit into the specifics of one of your campaign. You plan to bring 40,000 jobs for
Right.
DC residents.
Sure.
Is there any strategy that you're thinking about to make that possible?
Yeah. Industry attraction. Right now, DC is suffering because we rely too heavily on the federal government. We assume that these jobs are always going to be here. We assume that tourism will always be attracted in this direction, and our economy will be able to be sustained by being the seat of the government. Trump exposed that. Trump and his Doge cuts cut 20,000 jobs for DC residents, and many of them are either underemployed or still unemployed less than 2 years after these Doge cuts. So we're seeing the free fall of our tax dollars and opportunities. And these jobs are not just how we pay our rent, it's also our sense of purpose. right?
Mm,
People who work for the government are not doing it to become millionaires. They're doing it because they have a specific skill set. They want to be in DC. They believe they can serve in this role. Maybe there's good benefits. But taking that away without warning has really exposed the district as being over reliant. So bringing industries like international development, working on bringing a real grassroots approach to boosting our economy and getting our jobs back will not only fuel those specific jobs, but we'll get our coffee shops back. We'll get our restaurants back. Create a real trickle up approach rather than giving billionaires corporate tax cuts to help hopefully invest back in the district. I believe that's not only a way to stimulate our economy, but also pipeline using UDC being tuition free, pipeline young people and folks that want to get into a new career or re-enter the workforce into the jobs that we need for tomorrow. So they're all kind of work together, even though they sound like separate campaign goals. They all work together to rebuild our district to be independent and also be self-sustaining. I mean, we have every embassy
mm.
in the world in DC. We have so much diversity in DC. We have so many people that lost their jobs from USAID and the State Department. We need to extract some now, galvanize all of that.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Something came
Mhm.
to my mind in terms of pushing policies forward, and you're on one side and you have your political friends that are on the other side in terms of
Mhm.
believing things should be done differently. So for you, it, when you get together to talk about policy, when you get together to push policy forward, how do you interact with your colleagues that believe things should be done differently? Uh, Maybe in the same party or a different party.
Yeah,
How do you get that done?
the way you work with people is by starting where you agree. You know, you don't start with I want this, you want this. We start with where we agree and try to navigate that ramp together. And sometimes people may want something different. Well, sometimes people want the same thing, but they want it in a different way. And then you show which way makes the most sense. So right now in DC, we are having a teen takeover situation where young people are in the streets in the middle of the and like all throughout the night. And a lot of the elected officials and a lot of people in DC are pushing for a teen curfew. They just want the young people gone. They want to give police more tools to kind of disperse these kids. But the problem is, if you look at the data, curfews don't work if they're not from the parent.
Hmm.
The government cannot create a curfew and make it positive. It can't, it won't work. Because yes, you may push young people from this place and out of there, but the young people are going to end up somewhere else. So you're not really creating a solution. And I know a lot of adults, a lot of parents, a lot of people are concerned with this teen takeover crisis. The issue is that they don't want kids out at 11 and 12 o'clock. Now, how we get there is a little bit different. The data shows if you keep young people engaged from 3 to 10, they're going to be too tired to go out at 11. If they're working, if they're having an activity, if they're doing an after school program, they're less likely to be outside at 11 o'clock. Now, we both want young people to be in home at 11 o'clock midnight. But if there's one way that's popular that does not work, then you guys can get back to what you agree on and say, try this out. And if they see what we try out and it works, maybe they'll be more likely to say, all right, we're going to go back and pivot this direction. And but when you start with what you guys disagree on, then you're just going to be fighting each other. If you start with what you guys agree on, then hopefully there will be an opportunity for us to come on the same page. We'll try your way for a little bit. When you see it doesn't work again, because the data shows it's not going to work, and we try a little bit of this, they're gonna say, you know, maybe we were wrong. Let's invest in this and do it that way. But you can't do it by demonizing people. You can't do it by throwing political shots at people. You can't do it by ignoring people. You gotta work together. You gotta talk it out. You gotta disagree on a few things. You gotta try out a few things, and then hopefully we all get on the same page, and it won't be too late.
Wow, wow, thank you so much. We're wrapping up. Just a couple of minutes more. One
Mhm.
of the things that actually also jumped out at me is because I'm Nigerian. I'm Nigerian American. You're Nigerian American. That we have in common.
Uh,
That means that immigration is part of our story. All right.
For sure.
And I just want to ask you, what are your thoughts on immigration based on the fact that you are a son of immigrants, all right? How does that connect to you, and what would you recommend, basically?
Yeah, so our immigration policy, as you can imagine, is more personal for me than it is for other people. You know, my mom and dad, they came here for education by a plane. They were granted amnesty by a Republican president, Ronald Reagan, and that's why they were able to keep their citizenship. And nowadays, we're seeing a Republican Party openly antagonizing the immigrant community. We see a Democratic Party that's not standing up enough. I mean, they say the right words, but they do nothing to protect people at this critical point when they're being targeted. And at a time where ICE came to DC and they grabbing people based off what they look like, grabbing people regardless of their citizenship status, and straight up kidnapping folks, we're not seeing DC government fight back much at all. So what we could have done was increase the immigration legal fund that will provide attorneys for non-citizens, right? Because when I did my town hall, I brought attorneys around. The community didn't even care about what I had to say. They said, "Just bring me the lawyer. Like I don't care what you say a great speech. Go out, get out the way." And I think that taught me like, hey, like folks need services, even if they know the law one, two, and three, they still want that attorney to say, that's right, that's right, that's right. Because when it comes to immigration, nobody wants to file the papers wrong. Nobody wants to go to court and have something left behind. They want that person to give them their assurance that you're doing it the right way because immigration, especially today's time, is extremely serious. We have to make sure there's equity in our visa program. Few years ago, one of my interns was born and raised in Nigeria, had a visa. He told me that his visa runs out every 2 years, whilst his Indian classmates ran out every 4 or 5 years. What that means is that he has to go back to the country every 2 years, spend that money, put himself in danger, put himself all these things, just because one country was deemed to be willing to have it 5 years and another country was 2 years. That's not fair. Now, in time right now where folks are extremely concerned about leaving the country and coming back, we should have a lot more equity and parity. We need to have jobs in DC that are willing to sponsor visas and whatnot because that's very attractive for someone who's coming to this country that wants to stay here. They shouldn't have the entire weight of the shoulders on their back. These employers who are interested in this talent pool should be willing to invest and keep them here and keep them comfortable. Those are easy things we can do. DC, we should have a language services. Right now, the government is blocking a $17 million investment for folks who speak English as a second language to understand government resources. That is an investment that can have someone go to the hospital early enough, can seek law enforcement support early enough, seek services at schools at their preferred language. Now, just because somebody speaks English as a second language doesn't mean that we shouldn't allow them to get information in their preferred language. They'll be able to ask a question that may escape them if it wasn't in the preferred language. And right now, we're spending billions of dollars extra because our government is not efficient. This helps increase our efficiency. And these are things we can do right now. We can't change the president right now, but we can invest in those who come here in life who are trying to make a better way, pay taxes, pay social security, all these things. They deserve a government that reflects their comfort. And that's something that I want to do as a council member.
Wow, wow. Thank you for. So you mentioned something just now, money expenditure, which make me think about economy.
Sure.
Yeah, which is like the big picture now. It's the way money is being spent and things like that. So
Yeah.
if you want to think about the way you recommend things to change in terms of the economy to make the economy better, looking at the groceries, for example, the gas and things like that, what would what would you be able to recommend?
Well, the economy oftentimes is based off the stock, right? That's not the true markers of the economy because if the rich are getting richer and everybody else is, stagnant, then it's not really showing the healthiest economy. Right now, DC, as I mentioned before, has the highest unemployment rate, 7%. My neighbor's upwards of 20% unemployed. It doesn't matter how cheap we make gas if people have no income. It doesn't matter how cheap we make housing if people have no income. It doesn't matter how much we do to make life a little bit easier if people don't have an income. Replacing people's income by giving them real dignified jobs and bringing in industries that can hire people at that high clip that they used to be making is how we make things better. But we do have to bring down the cost of housing. Housing is one of the biggest expenses in DC. We have corporate equity, private equity firms buying up my block, putting nicer floors and selling a house that should cost 200,000 to $600,000. We should be having this happening in DC. It displaces Native Washingtonians. It pushes people who may otherwise want to be in DC to Maryland or Virginia, and it's not good for our economy. But we do need to bring the price of groceries down, whether it's having more farmers markets and making sure people have access to sell there, whether it's bringing alternative business ideas so we can have more shared spaces to bring the cost down, but also investing in our local entrepreneurs. These things can happen. And if we recycle our money through each other more often than we do right now, we'll have better outcomes.
Wow. Recycling and having better outcomes. Thank you for joining us, Goldie's Harbor on Instagram. Thank you for joining. If you're here, you still have last minute question, introduce yourself and ask a question. You have the opportunity to do that as we wrap up. One of the things I want to mention is the fact that the position that you have currently is called United States Representative position, but it's shadowed. And I think I saw in one of your posts that you preferred to be called the unseated position.
Sure.
But why the preference for the change?
Right, because people call it shadow representative, and oftentimes people in my position who in this role felt that it was demeaning, it was pejorative. The ballot says U.S. representative, and calling it shadow sometimes diminish that role that we have. Now, when I first became the representative, I took a really hard stance on that. I made sure that people either called me unseated or just U.S. representative because I was on the title. But as I got into this role, I realized that it didn't really matter to me much anymore because my work did the talking, right? When you help returning citizens get their records cleared, when you save seniors from being displaced, when you're doing hundreds, if not thousands, of experiments with young people, getting them to become scientists, when you're helping nonprofits get the funding that they were promised but didn't get, it didn't matter what people called me. I earned that respect. And
Yeah.
and when people felt disrespected by the term shadow, I earned it and then some with the work that I was doing. And being an elected pharmacist in DC, I was able to have conversations with the mayor and educate her on healthcare. So it got to the point where people stopped even saying shadow rubber, even rub. I just became Oye because all the value I brought to DC. So, but to answer your question directly, is more of unseated representative because we're not seated by Congress than it is shadow because shadow means that you're almost not real. The work that I've done is very real. Who I am is very real, and the impact that we have in DC is palpable. So maybe the future representative will kind of continue pushing back as I did before, but that was the reason behind it. But at the end of this day, people can call me whatever they want because the work has been speaking for itself for 5-6 years.
Good, good. Thank you so much. My last question is now you have election coming up June 16th,
Yeah.
primaries, DC Council at large, eventually it's going to be the main election. So what do you want to say about that? What do you need from people for support and how can people engage with you?
Absolutely, absolutely. Our election is on June 16th. We have mail-in ballots coming out on May 11th through 15th, so people can actually vote from home. We have a new program called ranked choice voting, which means you can rank your candidates because the idea is that we want more than 50% of of the voters to choose the next council member. Currently, whoever wins plus one gets all the vote. I mean, gets the election. And what we've seen is that candidates don't bother going to certain communities. They just know where the numbers going to come from and try to drive that out. Ranked choice voting forces candidates to touch the entire district because you can't leave any stone unturned. But I need you guys' help. If you live in DC, please consider voting for me. You know, we are 6 years into the making, but we're really trying to change the next 10, 15, 20 years of DC. You can follow me on social media, REPOYE Rep Oye DC. My website is vote number 4 Oye.com. You can donate. We do public matching, so you can donate up to $100. If you live in DC, that donation is multiplied times 6 to become $600. If you don't live in DC, your donation is not going to be matched, but it's still going to make a big difference. So please donate. Please get your friends in DC to donate, but more importantly, keep these conversations alive. I've been elected 7 times in a city that can't not pronounce my name.
Yeah.
Right? You know, Owolewa is easy here, but not easy everywhere. So we have to go that much harder to make sure that people are voting for that name because, you know, our name does stand out. We need also the support to stand out as well. We're doing very well. We got 23 endorsements leading the field combined, but most importantly, we need to make sure individual people endorse us, passing it off to their friends, letting them know, hey, we heard this guy from Oye, he sounds really good. You need to check him out. That makes the hugest difference in this campaign, and that's part of the reason why we're in such a good position.
Good, good. Thank you so much. This is going to be the end. Thank you, United States Representative Owolewa, for your time. Really appreciate your knowledge, your experience. I've learned a lot. There are certain things that I did not see from outside. Now that you're on the street, I kind of understand, and I hope our viewers have also learned something. So if you like this, comment, share, like, subscribe, so that we can reach more people. And please, if you wish and you understand the mission of United States Representative Owolewa, please reach out to him, support him the way you can. And it's going to be the end. Thank you so much. All right. Bye.
Thank you, guys.